Today's trip back to the 80s for the I Love the 80s series sends us to 1988, January 8th, 1988 to be exact. The release date theatrically for Return of the Living Dead Part 2, one of my favorite offbeat zombie movies. Yes, directed by Ken Wiederhorn, music by J. Peter Robinson. The original score was changed for the DVD release, but it was changed for the Shout Factory Blu-ray release. Budget of $6.2 million, drew $9.2 million at the box office. Two of the titular characters from Return of the Living Dead in 1985 returned for this one. The characters played by James Karen and Tom Matthews of Frank and Eddie in the first movie were almost alternate reality versions of themselves in this. Frank and Freddy had turned into Ed and Joey in the second installment of the series and added Joey's girlfriend Brenda into the mix. The sequel starts out by referencing an event from 1969 when the Army was doing experiments on the 245 trioxin, which is the chemical that creates the reanimated corpses or zombies and creates their hunger for brains. No, I don't know if that's where it comes from exactly, but it is funny that this chemical's still around. And they start with the little opening montage sequence with the barrels. And you see the Colonel, who is the only other returning character from the first movie, and he says, "My God, not again," when he finds out they lost one of the barrels. And while the chemical's in transit, they keep focusing on one of the soldiers driving the trucks, and he's wearing earphones and listening to a Walkman. And for those of you kids out there who don't know what a Walkman is, it was a decent-sized, heavy tape player. Yes, cassette tapes that you used to listen to with headphones on that had wires. So there's something for you Zennials out there who don't know what Walkmans are. But yeah, and the funny thing is he lights up a joint while he's driving this military convoy vehicle carrying this chemical. And of course, one of the barrels falls out and rolls over a bridge and ends up in a drainage ditch. Shortly after that, we're introduced to the main character of Jesse Wilson. He is a young kid, typical 80s trope, very nerdy. And, you know, our introduction to him, he is going to his room and going through his comic books, which when now I look back at this, him pulling these comic books out in his spectacular Spider-Man, it's like, oh my God, like that is a gold mine, treasure trove of actually good comics. But he's going to trade one of his comic books to a couple neighborhood boys who are clearly older than him, and clearly by 80 standards, they look like bullies, Billy and Johnny. And of course, Billy is a ginger, soulless, dead eyes, hair slicked back, and they're going to initiate Jesse into their quote-unquote club, which is they're just going to lock him in a mausoleum. And, you know, it's funny because this scene is it's very 80s, you know. He tries to back out, and they're like, "Oh, you're a chicken," and he runs away. And this is where they find, you know, he hides in this drainage ditch that just so happens to be the same tunnel that the 245 trioxin, you know, fell into. And they end up locking this kid in a mausoleum, long story short. So there's kidnapping and like attempted murder in the opening sequence of the movie. A very, very 80s trope for kids that everybody's like, oh, they're just kids being kids, you know. But before the two pricks, Billy and Johnny, as pictured right here with Jesse, before they lock him in the mausoleum, like I said, they find this trioxin 245 in this drainage tunnel, and they're intrigued by it. So, you know, they of course take note of where it is, take Jesse, lock him in the mausoleum, which Ed and Joey happen to, you know, the same one. They show up at that cemetery to rob the mausoleum. And then these two pricks go back later and open up the canister and release the Tar Man, who was from the first movie. And, you know, these two get the gas out of the thing right in the face, Billy and Johnny, but they run away. You don't ever find out what happens to Johnny because he doesn't fucking matter. But, I mean, look at Billy. That kid's just evil. Like I said, those dead eyes and that gingerness, you can tell he's evil. But he gets his later in the movie by Jesse's hand, which is kind of nice to see the little guy get his comeuppance. While I do have an in-depth review of this movie written, I'm not going to bore you with all that because you're probably familiar with the movie as it is. And what I wanted to do was just kind of hit a few of the cool spots of the movie, like in the mausoleum when the corpse start to reanimate. Ed hits one of the corpses that sits up in a casket in the head with a crowbar. You know, we have a cool scene with it sitting up and pulling it out of its head while they're freaking out. Brenda getting chased around the cemetery by all the zombies, and the scene with the trioxin 245 gas making its way into the cemetery and kind of, rolling over the ground, and then all the zombies reanimating and coming up out of the ground was a very cool scene. They mixed in some humor. There's a part where one of the zombies, he puts his hand out, it gets stepped on, he pulls it back a second time, but then one of the other zombies steps on his head. A female zombie popping her head out of the ground, and she can't see, but then she puts glasses on and she can see. The zombies can talk in this. They can run. They can drive cars. They use, implements such as weapons, and it's funny to see the difference in zombies between the genres. Now, this movie was pretty much maligned. People hated this movie. I think because it didn't follow the formula of the first one. It was such a far removed sequel from the original, continuity. But to me, it was just always fun. I saw this one as a kid before I saw the first one. And after watching the first one had a more serious tone, much more violent. There was no nudity in this, like there was in the first one. Of course, Linnea Quigley was in the first part too. She played Trash. We also have Jesse's older sister, Lucy, who is, one of the main characters of the movie. Although she really doesn't get much character development, she has to have the relationship with Tom, the cable guy, who inexplicably shows up at like 8:30 at night, which has me wondering if this guy works for like Spectrum or something like that, and can't keep a schedule. But he's one of the heroes of the movie as well, and you don't really get much character development out of him. But Tom is honestly like the closest thing we have to, like, say, a hero's role in this movie. Then we get the character of Doc Mandel, the fun-loving alcoholic doctor who seems pretty cool, played by Philip Bruns, who is actually Jerry Seinfeld's first dad in the show Seinfeld, before they recast him, which I always just found funny. Doc Mandel has a car. Our gang needs it. They go to his house while the zombies are breaking in. They get his car, which is Cherry, and they have a rooftop zombie scene, and it's really cool because they chop the zombie's hand off, and it ends up getting thrown out the window, and the last thing you see is the zombie's hand flipping them off as they drive away. We also meet some soldiers along the way. One of them...
Get hold of yourself, son. You're an American soldier. We got a firefight in our hands.
...is played by Mitch Pileggi of X-Files fame. Also, Horace Pinker in the movie Shocker, which is another Wes Craven movie, which I'll be talking about as part of this I Love the 80s series as well.
And the enemy's already dead. Beautiful.
Yeah, in this he plays a rather gung-ho cavalier soldier.
All right, you dead bunch of sons of bitches. On your tired, ugly asses right back to hell.
Who they meet their demise, of course, him and his partner here, but not without a couple cool scenes, and he's chomping on his cigar the whole time as they fire their weapons into the zombies to no avail. Back to Ed, Joey, and Brenda. Ed meets his end by the hand of the army as he bites one of the soldiers' heads, eats his brain. He's gunned down. Of course, he doesn't die. He probably gets electrocuted later on off screen. Billy the zombie still wandering around out there. We get his death later on. Brenda and Joey, though, they turn because they were exposed to the trioxin 245 in the mausoleum in the beginning of the movie. So the whole first half of the movie, they're turning. Slowly, Doc Mandel says, hey, they're dead. He's checking their vitals, everything at the scene there at the hospital before they go on to the meatpacking plant. But when our main cast does that, Joey and Ed and Brenda steal a car. That's where they run into the soldiers. They leave Ed. Brenda's trying to get Joey somewhere safe, and Joey chases her into a church, and he's like, Brenda, I want to eat you. It should be me. I'm the one that loves you. And he convinces her, and she just sits down and lets him fucking kill her. It was a great scene. It's totally 80s, and Tom Matthews is a treasure. So our denouement of the movie sees Tom, Lucy, Jesse, and Doc Mandel take a meatpacking plant truck, fill it up with brains from the meatpacking plant, bait the zombies down the street all the way to the power plant, because as they tried to exit the town on a bridge, they were basically fired upon by the army, who doesn't want anybody to leave the town. Everybody's already been evacuated except for them. They didn't know because the neighborhood that Jesse and Lucy's family live in is being newly developed, so they're kind of on the outskirts of town in like a subdivision. So as they lure them into the power plant, they have this brilliant idea to because Tom's a cable man, he knows electric, supposedly in the continuity of the movie. They throw brains all over this road leading to the power plant, which has puddles and potholes all over it. So they throw the brains all over the road, and the zombies are eating them. They're going to electrocute them. There's a snafu in the plan, of course, which leads to the side story of Jesse and Billy's showdown, and Jesse finally killing Billy, which is much deserved because he's a soulless ginger. And they flip the switch finally. Doc Mandel is supposed to do it, but he's distracted by a bottle of hooch. And Jesse flips the switch, electrocutes Billy, electrocutes all the zombies, and the Michael Jackson zombie scene is freaking hilarious. And that basically wraps up the movie. The army comes in to mop up, and that's it. And then we have the last scene with the talking head zombie that Ed cut off in the beginning of the movie in the mausoleum, saying, "All right, that's it. You win for now. No more brains." And then gets hit with the flamethrower, and that's the end of our movie. So you can see here, we have on the right side of the screen the Rotten Tomatoes audience score of 43% with 10,000 plus ratings, 20 reviews by critics, 0%. IMDb 5.8 out of 10 with 18,506 ratings and a 45 Metascore with 6 critics. Not received very well, although, like I said, to me, this is a fun zombie movie. As you can see, a great punch scene there from Brenda to a zombie in the graveyard. If you enjoyed this review, if you're enjoying the I Love the 80s content, trust me, there's more to come than just Galaxy High. I am working on more stuff behind the scenes, and this was a little rushed, I admit, but I hope you enjoyed it. Please share the video, hit that like button, subscribe if I've earned your subscription, and I'm Itepukuin of the Place to Be Reviews. I've been here with all of yous, and remember, if I don't see ya, have a great day, a pleasant tomorrow. I'll catch you on the next one.
Brain smells so good, so rich and spicy.
Spicy?
Yeah.